You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, thanks for coming back to the show. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm your host, Steve Adams, otherwise known to some of you as Mighty Blue. This week, Monica Aguilar joins us on the show. Monica has been putting in some miles over the past few years. She thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2018, then bikepacked the Great Divide Trail the following year, and was forced off halfway through the PCT last year because of fires. Along the way, while she was developing this passion for the outdoors, she started painting and drawing in a journal, producing a record of her adventures with some of the sights that she saw out there. She also started a podcast, beautifully titled, Shit We Do Outdoors. So naturally, we have plenty to talk about. Monica will be on in a moment. Then, as I said I would last week, we're going to hear again from Katie Wessling and Sarah Landis, who are nearing the end of their own epic journeys. Finally, of course, we catch up again with George Stefanos' Then the Hail Came, where George goes on a seemingly endless mission to find a Pizza Hut in Irwin, Tennessee. So now, let's hear from Monica Aguilar. So today's guest, Monica Aguilar, wrote to me recently and talked about creating on the trail. Hey Monica, how are you?
Hi, how's it going? I'm doing great.
Pretty good, thanks. So I think we need to start with your backpacking credentials. You thru-hiked the AT in 2018. The fires knocked you off after about half of the PCT last year. And in between, you bikepacked the Great Divide Trail. Is that right?
Yep, those are all correct.
Right. So which has been the most difficult journey so far?
Honestly, the bike packing was probably the most difficult for me. I feel like the Appalachian Trail, it was like a lifelong dream. So there was nothing that was going to get me off the trail short of like breaking my leg or something like that. Yeah. And so then actually bike packing was probably more difficult just because I like kind of knew what I was getting into because it is very similar. But at the same time, I felt like it was a little bit different and almost like a little bit more mentally challenging for me.
Oh, interesting. More mentally challenging. We're going to come back to actually the actual differences soon. But let's go back to your first one. And that, in my notes before, I didn't know it was a long-held dream. So why were you there in the first place? How long has this been brewing in your mind?
The Appalachian Trail?
Yeah.
I think I heard of the Appalachian Trail when I was in high school. And for some reason or another, it kind of got put on this like arbitrary bucket list.
Same as me, but I wasn't in high school. I was in my 50s when I first heard about it.
Yeah, we had this assignment that was like make a bucket list, and I actually still have it. And for some reason, that one kind of just stuck. And
what did you know about it at the time when you were at high school?
I guess not much. Maybe just that it was like a long trail that kind of went through Massachusetts and Georgia to Maine, and I had wanted to get into backpacking, and I figured that was maybe the best way to do it was with a very long trail.
Yeah, good idea.
I guess I always dreamed of big adventures. So,
is that something that you've always wanted to do? Just get out? Are you a nature person generally, or were you before you started doing this backpacking?
Yeah, I was pretty outdoorsy. I mean, I was mainly just doing day hikes. Like my family never really took me camping or anything like that, but I enjoyed being outside, and in high school, I guess I romanticized having all sorts of fun adventures and traveling to weird places and things.
So when did it become a realistic goal then? You said you and actually looking at my notes now, I see that you said you actually planned for it for about 4 years. How did that work out? What were you doing? You acquiring gear, learning what you needed to do, or just working out, trying to get that window where you can get away from work and things like that?
Yeah, mainly it was just like a window because I was in college and I didn't really want to stop college to go do something. I feel like it's really hard to, go back to school.
Sure.
So I kind of wanted to finish college first. And then, I was acquiring gear pretty much every like birthday and Christmas. I would ask for like a tent or a sleeping bag or something like that. And then I started doing a couple of, 2 to 3 day trips and things like that. So
and were you enjoying those? Was that a good thing for you, or did that whet your appetite more, or did you suddenly realise you needed to learn a bit more?
I think a little bit of both. I remember specifically, so I actually did a summer in Alaska, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chilkoot Trail.
No.
It's this very notable trail that all the people that were going for the gold rush would hike.
All right.
And so I did that with a friend, and I just remember my ankles were, a mess. My knees were a mess. I was cold. My tent probably wasn't the best setup. So I learned a lot during that trip. But
so tell us about that. Tell us about that trip. How long is it?
It's 33 miles. And so I was working in Skagway, which is in Southeast Alaska. And so, yeah, this is the trail that goes up into Canada, into the Yukon. And so it goes over like the US Canadian border. And actually, like right there, there's these weigh stations because there's scales because they were like having to bring X amount of gear with them in order to even be allowed into the Canadian border. So it's a very historical route.
Right.
And I mean, there's basically just a lot of trash on the route, but it is a lot of like remnants from, well, it's not trash, but it's like remnants from people going up.
Oh, weird. So, and that didn't put you off then?
It was really fun.
The fact after 33 miles, your feet were in terrible state, your legs were in bad way. You thought 2,200 miles would be a piece of cake, did you?
Yeah, I figured I have a lot to learn, but at least if I made it through that, I'm sure I could do another 6 months.
So what about family then? What do they think about you going on this long journey? Because sometimes it's a case of working out your timing to do this stuff. You have to put relationships on hold, family on hold, boyfriends and girlfriends on hold. What was that like for you?
So I was actually in a relationship while I was on the Appalachian Trail. And that was something that we talked about beforehand. Like, again, it was a lifelong dream. So he knew that was going to happen and wasn't necessarily interested in joining me. And my family's pretty supportive for the most part. I think, obviously they're concerned about your safety and they're assumed that you're going to get murdered or lost.
Are you going to take a gun?
Yeah,
and things
all
like
those
that?
things.
Yeah.
But actually over the years, my mom has become much more, I think she's used to it at this point. So she's just like, okay, make sure you let me know you're alive every once in a while. I'll check your social media. So
good to know. Yeah. So how did you feel out there? Were you kind of, did you ever feel nervous out there as a solo female hiker?
I never really felt alone for the most part. So okay. I didn't really feel that nervous at all.
Right. And so when the rubber met the road, so to speak, was the trail what you'd hoped it would be or expected it to be? Because when you build up an expectation over 3 or 4 years and a bucket list as a teenager, things aren't always as you imagine them to be. And I know, you get up to the top of Springer, you touch that sign, you get going and so on. Was that how you imagined it would be?
Well, I wasn't imagining the snow, I'll say that.
Oh, yeah, snow right at the beginning,
yeah.
Did you?
It was pretty cold, wow. But I think I'd like to think that I mentally prepared pretty well in that I knew that it wasn't always going to be sunshine and rainbows. So,
right. And it certainly isn't. Yeah, it certainly isn't, is it? So did your gear hold up pretty well in those early days? Because I think the early days are always the biggest test of somebody when they get onto the trail. How were those early days for you?
They were pretty good. I think that I tried to be really smart about, I didn't buy necessarily the cheapest gear, but I also didn't buy the most ultralight stuff. I thought I bought things that were pretty practical and sturdy, but also gave me room to grow. And so my gear held up pretty well. And obviously in the beginning, you're swapping things out depending on the weather. And you always start with too much.
And did you find yourself doing that, realizing something wasn't working for you and change it out pretty quickly?
I didn't change out too much stuff, honestly. I think there were some things that I ditched just because I erred on the side of carrying more just in case I needed it, and then got rid of
packing your fears.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and I suspect actually, and I've not asked this question of anybody actually before, if you went again on the Appalachian Trail, how different would your gear be, do you think?
Oh man, it's been so long. Honestly, I actually
it's only 4 years ago. What are you talking about?
I still use the same tent that I did on the AT,
right.
and
what was that?
I have a Big Agnes Fly Creek too.
Right.
And I pretty much have the same backpack as well.
So that's all worked out for you, the stuff
Yeah.
there. That's cool. And you mentioned when we spoke before about joining a tramley, but you'd already planned right from the beginning you'd be getting off at around halfway for a couple of weeks, didn't you? Tell us what that was about.
Yeah, so I actually started with this girl. We worked together and we were friends. And so we had kind of planned together to work halfway through the trail. And so the job that I was doing, it was kind of a weird job, but it was basically a job where you drive this truck and you pick up all these camp kids' bags throughout basically like the Northeast and like the East Coast, bring them to this warehouse, organize them, and then they get distributed to these camps. And so it's kind of like a quick
Wow.
and dirty, like you do it for like 2.5 weeks. You know, you're working like 12-hour, 14-hour days, making tips, making a lot of money, hopefully. And so the hope was that kind of her and I would be hiking together. We would get off trail and do this job, have a little extra money for the rest of the trail. And it was only like 2.5 weeks. So it didn't feel like we were kind of putting our entire hike on hold.
Right. And was that sort of really, did you do that basically to fund the rest of the hike?
I don't think I necessarily needed it, but it definitely helped.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. And when you returned, because I said you were with the tramley for a while, not just a girlfriend, weren't you? Did you were with a bunch of hikers at the same time? Is that right?
Yeah. So I was hiking with 2 other guys when I got off, because the girl and I that I started with, we kind of went our separate ways. She was a little bit faster than I was.
All right. So you go away for 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, whatever it is. You come back. What happens then? Are you by yourself then, or did your hike change dramatically?
Yeah, it was weird. I came back and I felt like no one else was on the trail. I was like, where did everyone go? And so I kind of just was a little bit of a drifter. I had a couple people that I would hike with like for a day or so. And then they would move on and I would move on. So I was kind of more or less like alone for about 2 weeks. And then some people that I had met in the beginning of the trail kind of caught up to me, or vice versa. And so I was able to like kind of rekindle old friendships and people that I met.
love you referring to yourself as a drifter. It does feel that way when you kind of not you don't sidle up to, but you come to a shelter and you meet people you've got some sort of kinship with and you get on well with them, and then you all hike out together and then one leaves another behind and so on. That idea of being a drifter on the trail is quite a good way of looking at it when you actually are a solo hiker, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's hard. I feel like, I mean, there was a lot of people that I was meeting that were also solo, but there was one group that I met that was already established, and like they don't want me to join in with them, you know.
Right.
Not that they didn't want me to join in, but they were, you know, they'd already have their inside jokes and they already have their crew and everything. So I was just kind of like an awkward addition. So I just joined for like a day or two and stuff like that.
An awkward addition of a drifter. Yeah, I got to tell you, Monica, you're not making this sound terribly appealing right now.
Hey, it's better.
Were you enjoying yourself at the time or not?
Yeah, it's better to undersell yourself, right, and then over deliver.
That is very true, very true. Now, what were when you finished? You got to Katahdin and so on. What were your big takeaways from the hike? Was this something you thought to yourself, "My gosh, this is something I can really, really do it"? Did you know that this was a sort of lifestyle that's going to become more than a one and done?
Yeah, I think pretty much by the halfway point, even probably before then, I knew I would probably want to do the Pacific Crest Trail as well, and like maybe do the Triple Crown. But I'm a firm believer of, one at a time. We don't need to like go all out yet. But yeah, I feel like it did really, I really drank the Kool-Aid of the thru hiker life, and made me kind of really look at my life plans and like what I had lined up, I guess, for the future.
Because what had you been doing? Once again, you can't just walk away from life generally, but you obviously did walk away from life in many ways. So what had you been doing prior to the hike?
So I still work this job, but I was working as a city bus driver for UMass and basically just transporting the students. And my original plan was to just kind of do that until I had my hike and then go find like a real job. Because this job's really good at like coming in and out. So I can like leave, go hike for 6 months, and I come back and I have a job automatically. And so it's kind of been the golden handcuffs, you could say, for thru hiking, because I can leave, come work, and then leave again whenever I need to.
So I'm presuming you're not with the same boyfriend then?
Mm-hmm.
because becomes, you've now gone was it 3 consecutive years of being out on a trail, or you went 2018, 2019, and 2021, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean that doesn't help with relationships going forward, does it? And it was on this hike on the AT, as I understand it, that you were not actually drawing and painting, were you? How did that part of your life start?
Yeah, so that kind of the Appalachian Trail was the inspiration, more or less. I was always I used to create and paint a little bit more in high school, and then I was in college, and you're really busy, you're working, you're doing your studies and things like that. And so when I was out on the trail, I was just really inspired by all the beautiful scenery, all the little flowers and the plant life. And so I just really wanted to like go home and do things for myself now rather than just like working the 9 to 5. So that's when I really started to paint again and create. And I like used all my reference photos from the Appalachian Trail, and I started, making these new paintings as well.
So I know that one of the things I wrote down when we spoke before, you said the artist part of you developed on the trail, not on the AT, but on the other one. You said life is about doing what you enjoy. Had you not been doing that, or have you been painting all your life, or what?
I think in college I was definitely working a lot, and I was not. I like to think that I do try to do a lot of things that I enjoy, but I was getting kind of wrapped up in like I was working over full time, like I was working full time and being a student and doing extracurriculars, and I was just like, you need to step back, and life's not about just like being chock full busy 24/7, although sometimes I still feel like I'm busy 24/7. So
yeah, I think most of us do. You think the idea, certainly when you retire, you think, well, I know you don't have to think about that, but when I retired, I thought to myself, I have plenty of time to do all sorts of stuff. I am working
so
all
busy.
the damn time.
Yeah.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And we've spoken with people in the past, but not actually that many, who've bike packed. So what are the different skills that you need to go from one to the other? You need a bike, obviously, but apart from that.
Yeah, biggest thing is a bike. You kind of need that. The equipment's a little bit different. So I used like whatever was inside my backpack was pretty much the same. But just the way you're putting it on a bike is obviously different. I had like 3 or 4 different bags that things would go into. And then pretty much, I mean, I didn't have this, but it's probably good to have a little bit more bike mechanic skills. I was with people that had more experience than me, so I was relying on them.
Oh, so you went with a bunch of bikers, did you?
It was me and then my boyfriend at the time and one of our friends. So
all right, so tell us about it. Tell us about the ride. What was it like?
Yeah, so the Great Divide mountain bike route, it basically follows the Continental Divide. You start in Jasper, Canada, and you go all the way down to New Mexico. So it's traditionally a southbound route. Actually, people race it. I didn't look up the stats, but you should look it up. The stats are crazy. People do this in like 11, 15 days, and it's almost like 3,100 miles. So yeah, it's a little crazy. I was not going that fast. But so we started in Canada. Our bags were overladen with gear. Again, you don't know what you need yet. And it just brings you right along the Continental Divide. So it's mainly gravel routes or gravel roads, and then there's a little bit of mountain biking involved, a little bit of road riding, and very much a love-hate. It's so different, but also so similar to backpacking. So
same mentality, I suspect, because you got to get up every day, pack up, and get on your bike and get going, didn't you?
Yeah, it was definitely very similar, but just like, again, it's I guess like it's different because it's only 2 months. You're able to also, like, the logistics are so different. Like, you're able to bike in and out of town if you want, rather than having to worry about hitchhiking. And it's like, oh, there's a gas station 2 miles down the road. Why don't we just bike there?
Easy, yeah.
So,
what sort of big miles were you doing? Were you doing any big miles at certain days?
Yeah, so in New Mexico was our biggest mile days. We were basically doing town to town because of water. And so I think our biggest mile day was like 135 miles or something like that.
Oh my God, you really? Oh my God, that's horrendous. I couldn't imagine. So tell me, you finish a day of 135 miles. Obviously your legs are fine, but your backside sitting on a seat for 135 miles. and I'm not asking you for a particular description of that, but generally, when you finish at that mileage day, what does it feel like?
Well, you cry a little bit first, and then for me, yeah, I think that was like the hardest part. Like you were talking about, what were the differences? Like I think the hardest part was it was very much like a whole body pain, like my wrists and my back, my neck, my butt, obviously. And yeah, it was a surprising amount of pain to deal with. And I'm a slower biker. So, maybe my friends would be done in like 8 to 10 hours, and maybe that would take me like 14 hours or something. So a little bit more time in the saddle. And
that's interesting. I haven't got a question about this, but I'm going to ask one as I just thought of it. So an AT or any long distance through hike is quite debilitating on your body. It really does impact you after say 5-6 months on the trail. Do you have a similar debilitating effect from a bikepacking trip?
I mean, I think it took me a little bit to get back into the swing of things. And I mean, I don't know if I have any like long lasting permanent pain. But I mean, my feet too, like my feet were really sensitive after the AT. And I think that kind of followed me into like this bike trip as well, actually.
Sure. Did you fall off at all?
I didn't, but my first ride back home, I fell off really badly, ironically.
So you did over 3,000 miles on the Continental Divide Trail or on the Great Divide Trail, and you fell over when you got home.
Yeah, it was really embarrassing. It was in front of a lot of people too, and like I thought I was pretty cool because I just done like 3,000 miles, and I just like embarrassed myself really badly.
That is funny. That is funny. So then the PCT and the fires in California screwed up your PCT hike. What did you get, halfway?
Yeah, so we basically did Washington and Oregon. We tried to get into California a little bit, but we didn't get too far.
Can you give listeners some idea of the compromises you have to make when there are fires to go around?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that trail, if you don't mind, I'll give you like a little rundown of the whole thing, because the whole thing was a big compromise, I would say. Like we wanted to go southbound, and we started 2 weeks too early. So right off the bat, we were dealing with like a lot of snow. And so we had to take all these lower alternate routes to get to the Canadian border.
Sure.
And then, there was some fire closures in Oregon that were like from previous years that we had to skip. And then we tried our hardest to deal with the fires. Like there was a group of 10 of us, and we actually rented a U-Haul to try to go around because NorCal was on fire. And we were trying to get some of the mileage that was like still open. There was like, 50 miles here and there that we were trying to do, and they just ended up kind of closing everything. And so then we go into the Sierra, and then as soon as we're in the Sierra, the Forest Service or the Park Service or whatever closes all the fires. So it was really hard because we were already really upset about missing NorCal. But then, we were like, it's fine. We can still have a through hike. We can still finish. And then it kind of just ended up being that there was no more trail to hike.
How dispiriting that must be. I went to the John Muir Trail, 3 times now, nightmare. And I've got a great picture with the smoke in the valleys. It's lovely to see cloud in the valleys, but it's terrible to see smoke in the valleys. You can kind of smell it, can't you, all the time? Mm-hmm. How close did you get to any of the actual fires?
So there was one active fire. I think we were in Oregon at the time that we literally walked by. And then when we were driving around the fires, we went into South Lake Tahoe, and like the AQ, air quality index was like through the roof. Like we could see ash falling from the sky.
Oh God.
And so that's just crazy. Like I'm from Massachusetts, so that's not something I ever really think about is air quality or fires. So
sure. Well, we landed in Reno when I went last year on the John Muir Trail, and it was 50 miles away from the start of the trail, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong there, but I think it's 50 miles away. And the smoke was horrendous. You couldn't see more than about a mile and a half. So it really does travel all over the place, doesn't it? Are you going to go back there to finish that this year or next year? When are you going to do it?
Yeah, I'm thinking PCT? Next year. I have no idea logistics-wise what I'm going to do, but I think I'm just going to redo California because I feel like I've done Washington and Oregon. So
sure. So talk to us about keeping this watercolor journal, and what sort of things were you actually painting? And you say you started that on the Great Divide Trail. This was actually a journal which you would do So you do some commentary and then do a drawing? How'd that work out?
Yeah, so I started it on the Great Divide. I was planning on doing it every single day. I was pretty good for the first month or so. And then after a while, like after 135 miles a day, you're like, I'm not doing anything.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so it was just like, I think it's a moleskin. They're pretty small. It's maybe like, I don't know, 3 inches by 5 inches or something like that. And depending on the day, I would stop and paint. Or I would maybe take a picture of the day, and then in my tent later, I would paint.
So you'd actually paint inside the journal, and which must be pretty small then. Some of these paintings.
Yeah, they're all pretty small. They're all about 3 by 5, and then I also usually carry a paper journal, so I would like journal as well. So they're kind of corresponding a little bit.
And what gear do you have to take to do a watercolor journal? Tell us what you actually took.
Yeah, so I have this little watercolor set. It's pretty small, so it's just like the paints. You can also get watercolor paper that you can like cut them up into small pieces. And then I kept it really simple. I just had like maybe one pencil, a pen, and like a paintbrush, and then an eraser and the paper. So it wasn't too heavy.
And so you've now got a record of basically your journey with the watercolors, which must be a pretty cool thing to have. And you mentioned in your email to me that you could suggest other ways that people can create on the trail. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that everyone has some sort of creativity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be painting. There's this one girl, I think she goes by Taugoy is how you pronounce it, and she does poetry when she's hiking. And I mean, there was a girl when I was through hiking that had a trombone with her.
Really?
Yeah, her name's Slider.
I've seen a guitar, but Slider, excellent name. Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that even if you don't have to necessarily bring this, like you don't have to bring a trombone with you on trail, but I don't know if you have your phone or something like that. Like you can always journal. You can always like do little voice recordings or do little drawings.
Yeah, do a podcast. Damn right, yeah, do a podcast.
You can do drawings. You don't even have to be an artist to, do a little doodle or something like that. So.
And why are you actually called Moss, by the way?
Yeah, so my trail name is Moss. I was given it by one of my friends in the beginning of the AT because I was always stopping to pet the moss. You just
how do you actually pet moss?
Well, you see it on a little rock and it looks really fluffy, so you just like go over and give it a little pat.
Give it a little bit of love.
Yeah,
nice.
You gotta give it a rating. You're like, oh, this one's like kind of crusty and gross, or like this one's nice and fluffy. So
and of course, as a fellow podcaster, naturally I'm interested in a podcast that you've called Shit We Do Outdoors. Surprisingly, it is exactly that. Tell us what it's about, because it can't just be about that.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Shit We Do Outdoors. It's kind of in a little transitional phase right now. Actually, I'm trying to see where I want to take it. But for the most part, this podcast is about empowerment, education, and entertainment. So the entertainment you can imagine is the poop stories. We have a lot of people from all sorts of outdoor backgrounds that come on the podcast. It is a lot of thru hikers, just because that's kind of the community that I'm mostly tapped into.
Sure.
And then the education part is I've had a couple of people come on that are experts. So we've had some privy maintenance people,
really?
some naturalists and things like that. And then the empowerment part is people living life on their terms. And I know it's called Shit We Do Outdoors, but I do really try to make it a podcast that's more than just about poop. So everyone does have to share a poop story.
Oh, right. So the poop story is mandatory. So that's a warning you give all your guests when they come on. They need to think of a poop story they've done.
Yeah, I haven't had anyone say no yet. So,
well, let's face it, we've all got one, haven't we, really?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going to do with it? What's your plan? What are you planning to do with the podcast right now? Are you going to try to change the title? Perhaps not the title, but you're trying to change the general thrust of the show, or put it in a different direction?
For the most part, I guess I like where it's going. It's just, I think in the beginning I was doing 4 episodes a month, and that was starting to feel like a lot for me.
Tell me about it.
So it's, yeah, so it's kind of gone down to like 2 episodes a month. And yeah, I'm just trying to find, because I'd like it to be more than just thru hikers. So it's just finding those other outdoor pockets to get into. So
Right. So what other areas are there then? Well, no, I know there are loads of other areas, but you talk about mountain climbers and things like that.
Yeah, and I want to get really involved with maybe like kayaking and canoeing, because that's something that you don't really like. That's a totally different ball game on like dealing with waste. And like, again, not all of it is just like about poop, but just kind of getting, like maybe rock climbers and like canoers and kayakers, more than just like the backpackers and hikers. And
I know the word you use it's meant to be about empowerment as well. It's something I've noticed about this podcast. I know people feel particularly empowered by some of the stories some of our guests have had. I am constantly amazed at some of the people out there and some of the stories they share. Have you got not so much a particular guest, but is there a particular theme that runs through it, quite apart from the poop? Is there a particular theme that runs through it that actually sums up that empowerment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a particular guest in mind. Her name is Tiffany Coates, and she has traveled the world via motorcycle like multiple times.
Wow.
And so, I think my biggest thing, because I am really inspired by people that are doing these kind of crazy human-powered adventures. And so I think just giving people the opportunity to see like what's out there. And even if you don't want to travel the world via motorcycle for your entire life, hopefully it'll inspire you to like go take that overnight backpacking trip or like do something like for yourself, I guess.
I think one or two of us podcasters have vicariously encouraged people to look at a life outside just America or just their state or even just their town, which I know is somewhat prevalent, can be prevalent over here sometimes. And what have you, and obviously you've got your art as well, what have you thought of for future hikes and creative endeavors?
Yeah, so for me, I'm looking to finish up my Pacific Crest Trail hike next year. I obviously wasn't able to finish it, unfortunately. So that's going to be hopefully a northbound, finish up California. And then I'm thinking about potentially doing a cross-continental bike trip. I have no idea the logistics about that yet, but I don't know. I guess I'm picturing like Portugal to Italy or something like that.
Oh, right. You don't mean this continent, you mean another continent.
Yeah, something that's like international.
Wow, that would be cool. That would be cool. Well, look, I thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And I'm going to put a few links in the show notes for people to look at what you do. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Cheers then. Bye. She's turned the outdoors into her life and a business. How nice to be able to combine your passions into a way of making a living. I'll put links in the show notes so you can check out some of the stuff that she does. Before we move on to Katie, I just wanted to throw in another save the date reminder. Our Woods Hole weekend, which I was supposed to have completed the itinerary for this week, is being held at Woods Hole, of course, from Thursday the 6th of October till Sunday the 9th. I promise you, I'll have it done before the show comes out next week, and I'm sure any budding thru hikers or long distance hikers will find plenty of interest in what we're planning for you all. Stay tuned. Now Katie, she's in the whites. Enough said. Here she is.
Hi, Steve.
Hey Katie, how are you?
I'm good. I just had my first climb of the day. A little less than 1,000 feet and a half mile. It's like, what?
You don't sound terribly tired out, so that's a good thing. Where actually are you now then?
So I climbed out of Kinsman Notch, and I'm just up on that first little peak. I'm going to stay at a shelter that's at the base of the Kinsmans. So today I'm hoping it's not too terribly hard.
Right. How's it been? I can't remember. Where were you last time? I'm terrible with these things.
So,
I should check it out.
So let's see. So I'm into my fourth day in New Hampshire, and I started in Lyme, Connecticut. Was able to do a couple of bigger days for me.
Isn't that Lyme, New Hampshire? Isn't that Lyme, New Hampshire?
Yeah, Lyme, New Hampshire.
Right.
What I said, Lyme, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And then, so 2 days, 27 miles in 2 days, and then I slack packed Moosalok yesterday. So And that was special.
It's a mission, isn't it? Which way did you go? I actually went sobo on that one, both of my hikes, because the thought of coming down that path or that
Right.
trail with the water tumbling all around you and splashing everywhere, making it wet, I was
Right.
advised was not a good idea. And so I did that both times. I stayed at the Hikers Welcome Hostel, and went
Yes.
forward to the notch, up and over from north to south. Which way did you
That
go?
was exactly what I did.
Good.
That is exactly what I did, with the exception that on my way down, I had been sitting with my friend Rachel having lunch on a rock, and she said, "Well, where does the trail continue southbound?" And I said, "Oh, that's it." Well, that was not the trail. So I did it 500 miles down. 500 felt like 500 miles,
Yeah.
500 feet down, and then 500 feet back to get on the trail. I thought, golly, what a novice.
It's probably irrational to think this way because, you've done 2,000 miles. So, and yet wasting 500 miles is the biggest waste of all, isn't it?
Well, and the thing is your mind will look at a trail and say, "Oh yeah, yeah." Because you're up there in this above tree line, and you see this one well-worn path, and you say, "Well, that's." So and it was so well maintained, and I thought, this is nice. I'm flying down this mountain. And then I check, and I'm like, okay, let's go back up and summit Moosalok again.
Yeah, dear me. What a nightmare. What a flipping nightmare. So what was it like up there? I've been up there a couple of times, and it's been great weather up there. It's a lovely place to sit around and have lunch and things like that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was just beautiful, to be honest. You could see all the ridges in the distance, and there's something about being above tree line that I don't know. It's so
Yes, it feels almost like a lunar landscape. It did to me when I first did it. Yes. Well, certainly when I went onto Franconia Ridge, to me it felt like I'd always imagined the moon at some stage in the mountains of the moon would be like, and it's and it's a feeling that never goes away, because when you go above tree line, obviously in Katahdin as well, that's a pretty amazing thing, isn't it?
Yes. And, when you look ahead and you can see people in the distance, on the trail, that you don't have a real sense of how near or far they are. You can see so far.
Sure.
When you're up on those ridges like that, when there's no trees. And so, it was overall a lovely day. And coming up was pretty hard. That I would have to stop just because I felt like my heart was going to pound out of my chest. But that was, it's pretty impressive climb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's no, it's the thing is, if this was easy, everybody would and could do it.
Right.
But it ain't.
Right.
It's not it. Are you starting, because this is the toughest part of the trail, this and Maine. Are you about to be very rude? I was about to say you start to feel your age. Are you starting to feel a little bit worn down by the physicality, or are you getting stronger and stronger again?
How I measure that is how do I feel in the morning?
Sure.
Every day I'm tired at the end.
Yeah.
But is my body recovering after I rest? And I do sleep well. So I think, like this morning, I feel pretty good. Yesterday morning, I was tired because I had done, a 15-mile day the day before, but I was happy because I was with a good friend of mine, and we would chat, and when I'd get tired, we'd stop and just take a little break, and then keep going.
So what is it then before Glencliff? The Hikers Welcome. Is that Mount Cube and places like that?
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Mount
Okay.
Cube.
Yeah.
I stayed at the Hexacube shelter.
Oh, that's charming as well, isn't it?
Well, I didn't stay in the shelter.
Right. Yeah.
But it's tricky finding a flat tent site at some of these places. But,
absolutely.
I was thinking about what you were saying about how I was feeling and, thinking emotionally. And, someone said, wow, you must really feel proud. And people on Facebook and my family are just like, oh, this is so amazing. And yet, I don't have that feeling. The feeling I have is, oh my God, thank God I haven't injured myself yet. So I just feel grateful that, okay, today I did it. Okay, now today I did it. And each day I did it.
Yeah. And you know what? That is being in the moment. But I can tell you, I'm pretty sure this happens to a lot of people, because it certainly happened to me, and a lot of our guests come on the show. And I often think it's unfair of me to interview them either while they're hiking, which is what I'm doing to you, of course, while they're hiking, or just after they finish, because I don't think they've had the ability to sit back and think what it is that has just happened to them, because this has this has happened to you. You've done the work on that, but it has happened to you, and so I don't think you really have that time to sit back and reflect on it. I think in 3 or 4 months' time, you'll think you will get that pride. That'd be a really important thing to feel as well, because it's a massive accomplishment, and accomplishment is one of the words I use a lot when I did it. I felt that accomplishment, which is why I like through hiking and not hiking. I like the thing of getting from beginning to end. That's why it's such a failure to me if I fail to do a hike, and I hate it. But that's just my nature, I guess. Tell us about the Hikers Welcome Hostel, because I think that was changing management the time I was, and I loved it. I loved it there.
Right. Yeah, I liked it. I did. I think it's one of the nicer hostels I stayed at. I'm a little bit trying to keep my head in a positive place. I think I left my Garmin there.
Oh, gosh.
So, yeah, that's all right. Going into the presidentials without my Garmin.
Yeah, no one is that.
Oh, my God. Anyway, so I did call, and they said they'd look for it. But, and I likely have left it pushed it down in my pack somewhere, thinking, okay, don't want to forget this.
Yeah. Don't worry about people. Some half the audience are going to say, no, that's wrong. But I never worry about people stealing stuff or picking stuff up and taking it.
No.
I think most hikers would feel terrible if they'd done that, and they would probably have a change of mind. So I suspect you've either still got it, you just can't find it at the moment, or it will turn up. You try to have faith in that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And did you stay outside, by the way? Did you stay outside at Hikers Welcome? Or you stayed in?
I probably should have. I'm thinking about COVID going around.
Yeah.
But I stayed in a bunk, and I slept well, and I feel like they've got it really organized.
Yes,
I feel like it is a really organized place.
And the outside showers and the toilets and the outside showers are great. Yeah,
I love the outside shower.
Yeah.
I did that at Hiker's Hut in Maine, and it's so when you're tired and sweaty, and it actually feels good.
It does. It really does. But look, where are you now then in terms of mileage? Because I know you've got this patchwork thing going on right now. So what are you up to?
I have right around. Let's see. Well, I think I have less than 150.
Wow.
To go.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think.
It's not all easy though, is it?
Yeah. So, right. Yeah. It's kind of like, 150 of a flat road walk or 150 of the white.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? The whites remind, at least the part I've done so far, and Moosilauke, it's like Southern Maine.
Definitely. Yes, absolutely.
So as soon as I got that, my head got into a much calmer place, because I've done Southern Maine, and I'm like, oh, I see what this is, and I know there'll be some big climbs, but Moosilauke was pretty big. And I think once I get up onto that ridge, I don't mind the boulder walking. I know it's hard, but it's something. This is crazy. People are going to laugh. It's something a little meditative about it,
Oh my God!
You're in full concentration, Steve. You know, you're like, okay, you know, so I'm just kind of you get into this little zone, and of course you have to take breaks.
Yeah.
You know, your brain gets tired. But
the climbs are tough, but as I've told many people in the past, you know, with all the miles you've done so far, there's not been a single mountain you've gone up you had to turn back because you couldn't get over it. You've got over every single mountain, so there's absolutely no reason you can't get over the next mountain. It's just bloody tough. You can take as long as you like, but you'll get there in the end, and then you go down the other side.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100% on that. It's just like, okay, you know, other people are doing this, and, you know, maybe I'm not as physical as some of them, but I can sit here and look at this and figure it out.
Sure. So how long have you got? 150 odd miles to go. So are you thinking 2 weeks now?
Well, I'm in my fourth day, and I've given myself, or I've estimated it'll be a total of 13 days in New Hampshire. So,
okay.
So I've got, after today, it'll be 9 more days.
Okay.
So,
we'll hear from you again.
The home stretch.
We'll hear from you again next week. And what I want you to do is, if you're going northbound here, think of me, or think of the show when you're going down Mount Madison after having gone up it.
Oh my gosh! Yes, you know, that's my last one, right?
It's an awesome climb up. It's an awesome climb up. It's a nightmare climb down.
Yeah, well, that's like my finale up here. So when I get down Madison to Pinkham Notch, I am done with New Hampshire.
Yeah, and you will be.
So, yeah. I'll need a drink after that.
You'll need several drinks. All right, Katie. Well, good to talk to you.
All right.
I'll speak to you soon.
Care.
Cheers then.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
She's got that stoic, get it done attitude totally dialed in, hasn't she? And why it's a no picnic, let me tell you. Yet she's gained strength by having done Southern Maine. And to be fair, if you can complete Southern Maine, then there isn't much you can't handle. I'm looking forward to cheering her home. And talking about cheering people home, Sarah Landis is in her last week. She's about to enter the 100-mile wilderness and spend the day at Shores. Great memories. Here's Sarah.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi there.
How you been?
Really good. How have you been?
I'm good. I'm a lot better now than I was. And you sent me a message that you're now at Shores, taking a zero at Shores. I remember being at Shores, and I remember the excitement that was kind of gathering all around you. People were turning up at Shores and so on. Especially taking a zero there, you're going to have more and more people turn up.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. It's been an amazing week, and it's kind of crazy feeling that it's so close to the end.
Yes. Yeah.
But I feel like more than anything, like, I'm still just trying to live in the moment. I've just been really enjoying every day.
Is it Maine amazing?
It's amazing. Like, it is everything that people said it would be. It's so great.
Yes, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? Really. I was expecting the excitement and everything to be over once I left New Hampshire and go on until I got to Katahdin. But oh my gosh, the first part of Maine, it's tough as well, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I was honestly kind of mad at Maine for the first 2 days. I was like, how are you so hard? It's supposed to be flat and easy.
Yeah, and how's the weather been then? How's the weather been then?
It's been really lovely. We haven't really had to deal with any rain or anything. There's some rain forecasted coming up, but it's been really great. Like, we've been able to stop and swim in a lot of places and just have a lot of sunshine. It's been great. But
you said in your text to me that you've been cowboy camping. Can you explain to people what cowboy camping is?
Just without a tent, just sleeping in your bag on the ground. And it's so nice because all the shelters in Maine, at least that we've stopped at, have just been on lakes or ponds.
Yeah.
And it's just a gorgeous place to just fall asleep and wake up next to the water, even without a tent. It just makes so much better.
Do you know what? I am such a wuss. You young women are just remarkable to me. I'm such a wuss. I would love to. Funny enough, I was actually thinking about doing that. I'm going on a hike in California at the end of this month, and I was thinking we're going to be sleeping on granite it'd be kind of cool to just cowboy camp one night, because I suspect the chance of things getting into our sleeping bag with us wouldn't be very high. But I'd always worry on the AT if creepy crawlies getting in.
My thing is like I like sleeping in shelters, and cowboy camping is it's kind of the same thing, just like without a roof, I guess. Like it's like bugs and mice and stuff are in the shelters. So it's I don't have less stuff on me when I cowboy camp.
Right. So what are you doing now then? You're waiting at shores and you're waiting for some of your family to catch up. How many of you are there right now then?
There's 3 of us here now, and then there's, I guess, just one more member of our family who's catching up to us today. But there's a lot of hikers that we are friends with that are getting here today.
Wow!
So it'll be a fun reunion, and it's been great because I feel like even though we're so close to the end, like I kind of thought we'd stop meeting new people, but. Like every day, like, you know, we pass people that are going slower than us or people that are going faster than us past us. And like, we're still meeting so many new people. So like being here at Shaw's yesterday, we were here like noon. So having the whole day to socialize and then having all day to like see people, it's so great. Like, I feel like it's just been wonderful. Like,
it's just like a school reunion, everyone. Don't you think it's a bit like a school reunion?
Kind of is. Yeah.
Really weird. So, and how's your gear holding up? Because I know that my gear was starting to look a bit threadbare by the time I got to shores. And I've said this once before on the show that I actually bought a brand new pair of socks just for the 100-mile wilderness, or just for the last 100 miles, because even though I didn't need to, you know, I had darn toughs and they were fine, but I just thought I wanted something that's never been washed and feels great when you put them on first time. It's almost like a comfort thing to give myself that extra boost. Is your gear holding up okay?
It is. Yeah, not really. My pack has gotten like torn to shreds. So I have like giant holes in like my side pockets.
Right.
And I'm like just trying to keep them. Yeah, I'm trying to keep them closed with Luco tape. But so that's happened. And then my shoes, I just can't keep my shoes in good shape. So I actually got a brand new pair just now. So
nice.
It'll be nice to wear like new shoes for the 100-mile wilderness and Katahdin and everything.
It certainly will do. So what's your plan for the 100-mile wilderness? Have you worked out the days and resupply and stuff like that?
We're gonna try and do it in 4 days.
Oh my God!
And I think we'll be able to do it.
Oh dear me, you youngsters, you drive me crazy.
We have like a 27-mile day, a 24-mile day, and like 2 22s, something like that.
Is that you haven't been doing anything like that up to this? I mean, to be fair, the 100-mile wilderness isn't desperately difficult. It's just you are by yourself quite a bit, and you probably can do pretty good miles. Is this because you want to get it done at a certain time? Have you already set your summit date?
The people in my tram are really shooting for August 8th. So
which is
I'm
next
just gonna
Monday.
Go along with them.
Which is Monday.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
Oh dear me.
So
that's gonna be something.
I know, it's really soon.
And what have you done in terms of food? You've obviously worked out your food by now, because if you haven't by now, you've been making a lot of mistakes.
Oh my gosh!
So have you got enough food for the trip? Is this going to be quite a bit heavier for 4 days? To get through for 4 days should be fine, shouldn't it?
Yeah. So I'm thinking 4 days probably isn't that bad to carry, but we might do like Shaw's. You can pay them to drop your food halfway through. So we might do that just to have lighter loads since we'll be doing such heavier miles.
Yeah, it's nice to do that. I've actually done that. I did that myself, and it was lovely to do. But really enjoy this, because this is your last wilderness, and it is. While Katahdin is absolutely the pinnacle of this hike, this 100-mile wilderness really, really stay in the moment, because I love this myself when I went second time, particularly because first time I came back to shores virtually every night. But, the second time I went all the way through, and that feeling of being back properly in a proper wilderness is a great feeling, and it's something you're going to remember the rest of your life. So really enjoy that part of it. And when you get to the end, I presume you're going to go into Millinocket, are you, for the night, or are you going to carry straight on and then go up?
No, I think like before Katahdin.
Yeah.
I think we were just going to go straight through and then go to Millinocket afterwards.
Oh, right. Okay. So what are your plans then for getting back to civilization? Because it's not the most conveniently located place, let me tell you.
No, I know. And I honestly haven't even worried about it yet. Like, that's a future me issue. But I was thinking, because I have to go back and I have to make up 97 miles that I missed in Virginia.
Right.
So I think what I was gonna do is maybe try and hang out in Maine for a couple days, like kind of soak it in. Like, I don't want to just like rush back home.
Sure.
And so I was thinking maybe like getting a bus down to Acadia, and then someone in my family lives in Massachusetts, and like we were gonna go down and spend a day there together. Nice. And then from Massachusetts, go down to Harper's Ferry and start making up my missed miles.
Yeah. What are the missed miles from Harper's Ferry to where?
It's the very end of Shenandoah to Harper's Ferry.
Right. Oh, okay, that's fine. That's nice. You do that. Probably do that in a couple of days. you could
hopefully in like less than a week.
Yeah. Don't let yourself lose your legs. So the next time we speak to you, hopefully, I'm not going to press you to do it, but if you can, I'd love to talk to you on Katahdin. If you can't, I understand. But as soon after you've
on the top of the mountain,
you'll absolutely have signal.
Okay.
So if you think about it, just text me. I will jump straight on and record you. If you don't, I entirely understand. But just enjoy the next few days because you're going to love them. It's just going to be awesome. Okay. And that excitement when you see Katahdin closer and closer, man, I'm jealous of you, I tell you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you so much. All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, enjoy it because you will. And best of luck, okay, on Monday.
Thank you.
All right, Sarah. Speak to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Oh, my God. Wouldn't it be great if I could interview her at the top of Katahdin? How awesome that would be. And, I don't know about you, but I could hear in her voice that she's kind of conflicted about it all being over. This has been a life for the past several months, and adjusting back to the real world isn't quite as straightforward as some of you may think. Some people call it post-trail depression, but I kind of regarded it as a bit of a funk that you slip into while you make that adjustment. And you've heard me say before that I think it's important to have something tangible to return to. Sarah and a whole lot of other hikers, they put their life on hold and she doesn't have a job to go back to. It's going to be interesting to see how she copes with the return, and I may well check back in with her in 3 or 4 months to see how she's doing. Thanks to our donors today, including recurring donors Kevin Eastman, Mike DiCello, Terry Hackler and Jens Lieberheider, as well as a generous donation from Kenneth Myers. Thanks to all of you. If you find value in what we're doing, we'd love for you to sign up and support the show going forward. Just click on one of the donate buttons on our hikingradionetwork.com website and you can show your support for our podcasts. Thanks so much. To finish up the week, let's hear the second half of Chapter 5 of Then the Hail Came. George has reached Irwin and he's a man on a mission as he seeks out a Pizza Hut. I'll see you next week. Saturday, the 28th of May, 1983, mile 313.1. I woke up to discover that it was already rather bright outside. I still felt quite sleepy and couldn't seem to drag myself completely awake. Finally, I went outside and discovered why I felt so sleepy. A huge full moon directly overhead was blazing so brightly that it had appeared to be morning from inside my tent. It was 2 a.m. What a gorgeous night. I woke up again at 7 o'clock and emerged from the tent just as the sun was about to come up over the trees. The sky was clear except for a slim band of clouds along the western horizon. I began to make breakfast. Within 5 minutes, the entire sky was overcast from one end to another. It was amazing. I headed out at 8:30, stopping to say goodbye to my 2 friends who had slept in an empty shack across the field. I felt played out and could not get going, a feeling that would stay with me all day. I followed the jeep road through an overgrown field where 2 gravestones were covered with fresh flowers. They marked the graves of a couple of local men who fought for the Union side in the Civil War and were killed in an ambush by Confederate loyalists while attempting to go home on leave. Many mountain people fought for the North in that war, more out of a long-standing antipathy towards the rich planters in the lowlands than a sense of loyalty to that cause. There was a steep, gut-wrenching descent on the jeep road off the mountain. I passed Flint Mountain Shelter at 10:45, the last shelter for 27 miles. The clouds above were thickening and continued to do so as the day wore on. I finally reached Devil Fork Gap, feeling tired and cranky. The next stretch was even rougher, 7.5 miles of hell, the hardest trail I'd hiked since the section before Fontana Dam. It began with a short climb and then a long vertical descent that made my knees ache. I almost fell down the last steep pitch near the bottom. I came out onto a 1/10 of a mile road walk, past a bunch of humble mountain farms. This was followed by a long stretch of steep climbing straight up a mountain. I was too tired to attempt to stop and then try to get going again. I had to make the whole climb in one shot. I became a robot. While the lean, mean mileage machine has fun and flies over distances, the robot has no feelings at all as it makes its slow, steady progress up the trail. I tuned out my mind to the growing pain in my legs as I struggled along for more than an hour. I finally made it to the top of a knob with no views and began a descent alongside a barbed wire fence into a sag. That was where I was finally rewarded for all the mindless climbing. Incredible views from that grassy little sag continued all the way up a sloping meadow to the main summit. I wiped about a pint of sweat off my camera's viewfinder and started shooting pictures. The trail descended on reasonable grades into Rice Gap and then climbed an overgrown jeep road straight up another slope. The trail began to go up and down like a roller coaster for a while before a steep grind led to a summit named High Rock where there were no views. God, it sucked. The descent from High Rock involved long, abrupt drops mixed in with occasional sharp climbs up knobs. It was a very discouraging trail for a tired robot. I finally reached Sam's Gap, having covered 15 miles. I had read in the last shelter register that many hikers have been sleeping in an abandoned building there, but the place was all boarded up and I could not find a way in. I would have to go on and tent in the rain tonight. The Appalachian Trail climbed from Sam's Gap up to the summit of another knob. Open fields along the summit and along the ensuing half-mile descent provided great close-up views of Big Bald. There were more meadows just on the other side of Street Gap, over which the trail climbed, gently for a change. The last mile was through the woods and had several more short killer climbs, but I eventually made it to a campsite at Low Gap, having come 18 miles today over harsh terrain. I figured it like this. I felt lousy and it was not going to be fun regardless of what I did. I could wimp out after a few miles and feel guilty as hell, or I could tough out a good mileage day. I feel content with my decision and it is nice to know that the next shelter is less than 14 miles ahead. Short day tomorrow. I pitched my tent, made a huge dinner and climbed into my sleeping bag. As I've been writing this entry, the rain has begun to fall. At least it held off until I was prepared. I passed the 300-mile point of the Appalachian Trail today. Sunday, May the 29th, 1983. Mile 326.6. Morning, mile 313.1. I'm writing this entry Sunday morning at my campsite in Low Gap as I wait for the weather to hopefully clear, a process which has slowly been unfolding. It would be a shame if I could not get any views from Big Bald. It is the first natural bald on the Appalachian Trail. I could see the grassy summit from the fields on the other side of Street Gap yesterday evening. I wish I had $1 for every low gap and deep gap in the southern Appalachians. They came up with colourful names for the mountains such as Thunderhead, Standing Indian, Charlie's Bunyan and Corbin Horse Stamp, but every other gap is called Deep Gap or Low Gap. Just an observation. Time to make breakfast. Later, mile 326.6. Since it was less than 14 miles from my campsite to No Business Knob Shelter, I decided to wait until 11 to set off if necessary. It rained all last night, but the weather had been slowly starting to break all morning. I was hoping for a chance to get some views from Big Bald. The sun actually burned through the clouds a couple of times as I was getting ready to leave. The only problem with that was that both times it did so, a heavy rain started up. Each time, a cloud moved in front of the sun 5 minutes later and the rain immediately stopped. I've given up trying to figure out the weather in these southern mountains. I began hiking exactly at 11, beneath a heavy overcast, but no rain. My first 3 miles were the climb up Big Bald. I knew from experience that the weather would progressively deteriorate as I gained elevation. I was right. Within a half mile, I was in a light drizzle, which soon became steady. The grades were excellent, a rare treat recently, and I made good time. Nearing the summit, I broke out into better weather. The sky brightened and I was approaching the top of the cloud. Were that cloud a little lower or that mountaintop a bit higher, I would have enjoyed some nice views. Walking across the open summit was still an experience. It was an immense grassland sprinkled with sparse, scrubby bushes. The wind was whipping shreds of cloud across the desolate landscape. I felt as if I were on a Scottish moor as I strolled over the summit and started down the other side. There must have been a mile or so of open fields. Towards the end, I came across a grove of strange, misshapen trees whose structures were contorted into all kinds of crazy angles. They rose from out the fog like a cluster of arthritic limbs. Around one, about a mile past the summit, I came upon a man and a dog sitting beside the trail. It was Ron and Sonny. It was good to see them again, and I talked to Ron for about an hour. He told me that while they were in Hot Springs, Sonny had actually got into a fight with another hiker's dog. After the fight, Sonny's opponent had required several stitches in his ear. Knowing what a coward Sonny is, it is hard for me to picture him being all big and bad like that. Ron also told me about the final fate of that little stray dog who had hooked up with him and Sonny. He remained in Fontana Village, following various people around for a couple of days, finally latching onto one married couple who liked him but did not want to keep him. Ron informed them of North Carolina's lack of animal protection laws and animal shelters, and how the local sheriff is forced to shoot stray dogs. Good old Ron, a new home for a homeless waif, and one happy ending in the never-ending saga of the young and the foolish. Ron was planning to camp tonight in a place called Whistling Gap, a short distance up the trail. He was highly amused by the name of the place and just could not resist staying there. Whistling Gap. He's a filthy, disgusting pig, and I'm going to miss his company. He also told me that he was planning to hike into Irwin tomorrow, but I know he will stop when he reaches No Business Knob Shelter and stay there tomorrow night. I will miss him in Irwin too. The bars which were reputed to be in Hot Springs did not materialise, just a state liquor store, making Irwin the first town on the Appalachian Trail which has them. Bar hopping with Ron and Dave could have made for one of the more memorable nights of my trip. When I resumed my hike, I climbed over Little Bald, from which there were a few views, and descended steeply into Whistling Gap. Gee, after talking to Ron, that last part sounds somewhat perverted. The sun had come out while I was with Ron, and things were looking up as I ascended to high rocks. The descent into Spivey Gap brought my mood down just a little. It had many steep pitches, and hiking over the muddy clay along the trail was like walking on ice. The Appalachian Trail was extremely difficult to locate as it climbed out of Spivey Gap, and the footway was a quagmire alongside a stream with mud that oozed up over the tops of my boots. The trail remained obscure for the next mile. As I was skidding recklessly down a precipitous clay slope through a tangled jungle of rhododendron into Devil Fork Gap, the sky began to darken once again. I virtually ran the final 3 miles to the shelter. It was of no use. A fast-moving thunderstorm caught up while I was still a mile away and drenched me to the bone. I may have uttered a few mild oaths as I swished soggily along the trail. Just as the shelter was coming into view, the rain suddenly stopped. I may have stopped f***ing with Mother Nature, but she is still f***ing with me. The bitch. 4 guys from Tennessee had preceded me to the shelter. They quickly and courteously made room. We were soon laughing and joking and having a good time as we made our suppers. One of the fellows had whipped up a large cherry cheesecake, and they were nice enough to save a piece for me. This was despite the fact that I had just polished off a huge dinner and my eyes lacked the usual lean, hungry thru-hiker look. I love the people I'm meeting in these mountains. They tell me there's a Pizza Hut in Irwin. I've not had pizza since I left Connecticut. If Dave or Ron catches up to me in town tomorrow night, I'm going for it. Hell, even if they don't. I have a mere 7-mile walk remaining to the establishment where I intend to stay, Nollichucky Expeditions, a whitewater rafting outfit in Irwin which allows hikers to camp in their field and use their hot showers for $2 per night. When I get there, I'm going to pitch my tent, soak in that shower and head into town. Monday, the 30th of May 1983, Memorial Day, mile 333.7. My friends made pancakes this morning. They were returning to their car today and wanted to rid their backpacks of all unnecessary weight. They told me to keep my food in my pack and they would feed me. Hey, I was only too happy to help them out. When the time came to get water for the trail, I wanted to do something nice for them in return for all that good food, not to mention the good company. I told them that I would make the trip for everybody. It was a steep 4/10 of a mile down the mountainside and back up. They left at about 11, while I stuck around for a while longer. I figured that Memorial Day would be an extremely hectic day for the outfitters, so I decided not to arrive there too early. I made myself some tea, whipped up some pancakes from my own stock, and kicked back for a while. The day was warm and sunny, but my enjoyment of it was tempered by the fact that the shelter turned out to be a haven for drugged-out bees. Rather than industriously collecting pollen as normal bees do, they buzzed aimlessly around the area, landing constantly on my backpack, my sleeping bag, and all the gear I was attempting to load into my pack. I finally made my escape just as a group of a dozen or so short-term backpackers were making their moaning and groaning way into the shelter. The first couple of miles of my short day were an easy, level hike along the side of No Business Knob, passing through yet another dense, scenic rhododendron jungle. I was compelled to force my way through a great deal of overgrown foliage along the trail, and many blowdowns had to be gone under, around, or over, but these were all minor inconveniences. The next mile was an easy climb, followed by an easier descent. This was succeeded by a well-graded climb up a logging road to a ridge, along the crest of which the Appalachian Trail briefly roller-coasted over a series of knobs. Then came a long, steep descent along a narrow spine with great views into the valley of the Nolichucky River below. This final ridge was covered with mountain laurel, just beginning to bloom. I emerged from the woods by a stop sign at the point where the river road intersects the main road into Irwin. At that exact moment, a convertible had just pulled up to the stop sign. Inside was an absolutely gorgeous blonde. Having just come out of the woods after a month spent mostly on the trail, I was not yet mentally prepared for the sensory experiences of a town. I was completely defenceless before the sudden, unexpected onslaught of hormones which had been shiftlessly unemployed these past few weeks, loafing idly on some street corner in my body. I stood there for several moments with my eyes glazing over and my jaw working spastically, but producing no sound before she pulled away. The spell was broken. I grinned sheepishly and congratulated myself for being such a smooth talker. Then I crossed the river and started down the river road. A couple of the Tennessee boys from the shelter were sitting nearby, waiting for their two companions who were hitchhiking back to pick up their car. We shared a few laughs as I told them about that blonde and the ease with which I had seduced her with my witty repartee, and then I followed the Appalachian Trail along the river road over the final mile and a half to Nolichucky Expeditions. I checked in at the office, pitched my tent in the field alongside the river, and took a long hot shower. I got out, got dressed, and began to make my way into town. For a foot traveller, Irwin was spread out very inconveniently all over the map. I walked the 1.5 miles back to the main road and hitched on that road for about a mile before I obtained a ride. The people who picked me up drove me about 2 miles into Irwin before dropping me off, telling me that the Pizza Hut was 2 miles further up the road. I quickly got another ride from a man who drove me for 2 more miles, informing me as he dropped me off that the Pizza Hut was another 2 miles further. I walked about 2 miles without a ride, seeing no sign of a Pizza Hut. I asked a passerby where the place was. You guessed it, 2 miles further up the road, on the left-hand side. I walked another mile or so, finally coming to a McDonald's, a Hardee's and a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I almost missed the Pizza Hut. It was on the right. I guess that the moral of this story is never ask for directions in Irwin, Tennessee, just 2 miles up the road from anywhere in America. I passed the post office on the way to the Pizza Hut. It was 6 or 7 miles from Nolichucky Expeditions. It seems I will be facing another long walk in Irwin tomorrow. In the restaurant, as I was wolfing down a small pan pizza, which was purported to serve 2, and 2 large colas, I met a couple who had camped with Ron and Dave in Whistling Gap last night. As that was only 13.5 miles from Nolichucky Expeditions, I was expecting to see Dave, at least, when I returned to my tent tonight. I decided I was not up for another long walk going back to Nolichucky, so I picked out a well-lit spot beside the road with plenty of room for cars to pull over and waited for a ride. A half hour went by before a middle-aged good old boy driving a pickup truck pulled over and gave me a lift. He drove me all over Irwin and the surrounding area until I began to wonder if he was a chicken hawk out cruising. I spent the remainder of the ride holding onto the door latch, prepared to jump if he pulled any kind of weapon on me. That was my northeastern background sneaking back up on me. He turned out to be just a nice guy who went out of his way to bring me all the way back to the field where I was camped. He was having a problem with his headlights. They kept going completely out whenever he dimmed his high beams, and he always had a lot of trouble getting them back on. This fact did not stop him from constantly trying them in an attempt to discover what the problem was, making the final 1.5 miles down the unilluminated gravel river road to Nollichucky a rather interesting experience. Flying along that dark, winding road, tyres spitting gravel, he would say, "I can't feel this out," which I had already noticed, and dim his brights one more time. The headlights would fail completely, and it would take him approximately a minute to coax them on once more as he continued to fly through the inky blackness. I do not know how he stayed on that road. Perhaps all those Budweisers I smelled on his breath helped. Neither Dave nor Ron was at Nollichucky when I returned. I guess they both decided to stop at No Business Knob Shelter tonight. It's now 10 o'clock. I must get some sleep. Perhaps I can dream up a slightly better line to use on the ladies tomorrow. On the trail between Hot Springs and Irwin, I passed an interesting piece of graffiti spray-painted on a road at an Appalachian Trail crossing. Somebody with an obviously twisted sense of humour had written, "Irwin, home of rock and roll." I like that.